Welcome to the Brute Strength Podcast, bringing you worldwide experts from all areas of health and fitness. We cover training, nutrition, coaching, and mindset. Welcome your host, strength and conditioning coach, 2012 and 2013 CrossFit Games champ, Michael Cazayoux. Mind, body, brute.
Hello. This is Mike Cazayoux, and you're listening to the Brute Strength Podcast. This week, I'm back on the show with my beautiful wife, Adee Cazayoux. And after our most recent show together on relationships, we got an enormous amount of positive feedback and requests for more. So I don't want to spoil any of this show, but in general, it is all about sex. So if you're someone that loves to have sex, this is a great show for you. If you're someone that wants to have more or better sex, this is the show for you. This was a blast to record with my wife, and I think you guys are going to get a lot out of it. So without further ado, enjoy the show. And we're back. We're talking about some more weird shit today.
No, not weird.
Weirder than ever. The Mac Daddy of them all. Guys, today we're going to talk about sex. So one of our favorite people, one of our favorite authors, her name is Esther Perel. She's one of the leading, I believe, family therapists in the world. And she's really outspoken, does a ton of public speaking, and we just really look up to her and all of her work. And one of the really interesting things that she says is that in our society today, people are actually more in love than ever before, right? And which is super counterintuitive because the divorce rate is higher than it's ever been. Mm-hmm. So she says we're more in love with than ever before, but our sex is just worse than it's ever been. And so today we're going to talk all about sex. And I want to start this off by saying, identifying the elephant in the room, which is sex is the most taboo subject of them all. Because of religion, because of society, we've just been taught, we've been taught to be ashamed of even talking about sex. And yet it's one of our primary drivers in life, period.
And needs
in life, right? So you were the one that brought up the idea to do this show in the first place. Why did you want to do it so badly?
I don't know if I wanted to do it on just sex, but I did bring up the idea of doing another podcast about relationships or things to do with relationships. And I think that was because the last one we did, which was 9 tips on, I think it ended up being 10, but the title is 9 tips to have a good relationship or something like that on the Brute podcast. And of all the podcasts I've ever done, I think I've been on like a couple dozen podcasts talking about a bunch of different things. That is the most overwhelming reaction I've ever gotten to a podcast, of DMs on Instagram, of emails, of people reaching out to me and texting me, meeting people in person that I've never met before, being like, hey, I just listened to your podcast on relationships. That was like super impactful for me. I've been feeling all those things, and hell, like, why not just do another one and maybe we can come up with some other good stuff. I think it's something that you and I work a lot on all the time. I think as opposed to or next to personal development and business development, working on our relationship as a team is way up there, way up there in our top priorities of something we think about and we work on and we read about and educate ourselves on every single day. So hopefully we have some more knowledge to put out there.
Yeah, it's funny. I was at the California Regional for the 3rd or 4th time ever. And over the years, I think as the podcast and Brute have grown, more and more people start to pull me over and just talk about either, whether they've been a member or they're a follower of the show. And so this year was by far the most. And what I heard more than anything was, hey, I just heard that relationship podcast that you put out. Me and my girlfriend, or me and my wife, or me and my husband we implemented such and such idea or concept that you guys threw out, and it was really impactful. And that kind of stuff is just so meaningful to us. And because we do work so hard at it in our own life, and we've seen how it permeates into every other area of our life. And so I think that's why we're so passionate about talking about it.
So part of it's selfish. We just want to get more feedback on people on how they're implementing the things that we're learning too. Exactly.
So first, let's talk about the difference between connection and desire, because I think that's we can't have a conversation about sex without talking about that.
Okay.
So
intro it for me.
connection, we'll talk about both and then how they're different. So connection is love. Connection is togetherness. Connection is ritual and sharing and vulnerability. Connection comes from getting to like building trust with someone and really feeling safe with someone. Mm-hmm. Anything you had to add about connection?
Yeah, well, I feel like connection can be with somebody that you're not intimate with. It doesn't have to be with somebody that you're having sex with. So it's like you can be connected and feel connection with your mother.
Right.
You can feel connection with a really good friend, with your niece or your nephew. Like connection is something you can develop with anybody regardless of the status of your relationship.
Right, and that's a good distinction, which we'll kind of bring up later. So the reason that I bring connection up is because there's a school of thought that we subscribe to that believes that what creates attraction in people is polarity, and polarity is when opposites attract, right? So masculine and feminine energy in particular, and basically creating some separateness. So when you first enter a relationship, and anyone listening, I know this resonates with, when you first enter a relationship, there's an enormous amount of sexual and physical attraction. And part of that is that polarity, that not knowing fully that other person, right? It's, what should I say? What should I wear? It's like the flirting and the courting. The uncertainty, exactly. If connection is certainty, then desire and eroticism is uncertainty.
For sure.
And in the beginning of a relationship, everything is uncertain. Like you don't know that person. You don't know,
right,
what their wants and their likes and dislikes are. You don't know, what their intentions are in the relationship.
You
Everything
don't know
is uncertain.
how they're going to respond. You don't know, like, are we going to kiss? Are we not going to kiss? Are they going to text me? Are they not going to text me? Like, I just messaged them. Like, is that something they like to hear? Not something they like to hear? Even when you do have sex with this person, you're like, do they like this? Do they not like this? Like there's this like buzzing of uncertainty.
It's tension.
Right.
That the tension is what creates sexual attraction. And so what we want to talk about today is how connection is actually the opposite of desire and eroticism. Connection, just by its nature, brings you closer together, and it creates this level of certainty. And so, again, just by its nature, it's just the opposite of sexual desire, right?
Yeah.
So, with that said, let's talk about some of the myths about sex.
Okay.
The first one, it should always be spontaneous.
Okay. This one's a big one. It should always be spontaneous, meaning like spontaneous, meaning I think what you mean by saying it should always be spontaneous is like I should be sitting doing work and all of a sudden just be overcome with desire to have sex with my husband, or he walks by and he looks good and I'm just like, I'm ready to go and do that anytime, like whenever the feeling comes about. I think that's a huge myth. Like at a certain point in a relationship, like you're talking about connection and desire, like desire is that level of uncertainty. That level of uncertainty decreases and you're still like your connection increases. So you're really deeply connected to this person. You feel very safe and there's not a lot of uncertainty. And that's part of the reason why that spontaneous desire to have sex with each other just diminishes. It's very consistent across most long-term relationships. And it's just, I feel like it's just normal to not want to have sex all the time, like especially like you do at the beginning of a relationship. And the myth is, it should be that way. Like I should just be motivated to. And if I'm not in the mood, it means I don't actually want to. When I think the truth is you can get yourself in the mood even if you think you're not in the mood. So you're like, oh, I'm too tired. It's legit like going to the gym. Legitimately, I feel like it's the exact same thing. And I think about that every time. Like, I'm too tired to go to the gym. I have too much work to do. I'm too stressed out. Like, oh, it's going to be exhausting. Like, I just don't want to. And sex is kind of like the same thing. Like, I'm too tired.
Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes. And sometimes
that's a frame that you can look at it. Like when you say it like that, it actually sounds kind of sad.
Oh.
That's like under certain circumstances, you can frame it that way.
Right. I don't mean that. Okay. So when I do say it like that, it does sound kind of sad, but I don't mean it in the way that it's like, that's how sex is all the time. But there are moments later in a relationship where you feel that way. You're like, I'm tired. I'm too stressed out. I got too much work to do. I don't have the 5 to 10 minutes or 15 minutes or however long it is to go and do that. And you think that because the desire to do that doesn't just come about, that you're just not going to do it. So you decide not to do it. Mm-hmm. Maybe you don't feel like you're tired, but maybe just because the desire doesn't just spontaneously happen, you decide not to have sex with your partner.
I think the problem is that people just don't talk about this, because the truth is, I have never met someone in a long-term, like a very long-term relationship that has sex exactly like they did when they first got together, right?
Of course.
You and I may or may not have had sex several times a day for the first year of our relationship, right? And over time, that level of desire just dissipates. That's just what happens naturally. And that's what happens in every single relationship. And that's okay. That doesn't mean that we are less attracted to each other. That doesn't mean that we're not in a great relationship. That's literally just, that's perfectly natural. Mm-hmm. The issue is that people don't talk about it. And so it's really easy to assume everyone else has an enormous amount of desire in a relationship. Right. They're just fucking popping boners all over the place, wanting to have sex at all times of the day.
I also think it's not something you want. It's something a little bit more embarrassing to disclose that you're struggling with that section of your relationship. Right. I mean, disclosing that you're struggling with any part of your relationship is really difficult. It's something that's so meaningful to you and so important and so intimate, mm-hmm. that it's really difficult to discuss any struggles, but this one in particular is like extra, like you feel extra exposed when talking about it. Mm-hmm. Like, is something wrong with me that we don't have like sex multiple times a day?
Right.
Or I don't feel like I want to have sex multiple times a day.
Right. Another big one is it's not that important. I think it's natural for one person in the relationship to want to have sex more than the other. I think more often than not, it's the man wants to have sex more, mm-hmm. but there's definitely a lot of women that have a higher sex drive. And then the one that wants to have sex less, I think, and this is just a generalization. This is obviously not something that all people believe, but a lot of people believe that sex is just not that important, especially when people have very serious careers and they have kids and they have serious hobbies that they're really interested in. Over time, they just start to discount sex, mm-hmm. which is a huge problem.
Yeah, for sure, because it's kind of like you don't know how good you could feel until you do something. Like some people maybe they're healthy and they monitor their nutrition a little bit, but they have like some unhealthy eating habits and they look fine, but they could be a little bit better and they could dial things in a little bit more, and they just don't think that it is important because they feel fine. But if they did dial it in a little bit more, they just don't know how amazing they could feel. So I think it's a shame if people don't think it's important. It's such an incredible opportunity to connect with your partner and to reach like your relationship will get stronger. Your personal life will probably be stronger. Your career will be better. You'll be happier. Mm-hmm. Like, I just think there's so much amazing about it that it's a shame if you're listening and you don't think sex is important. It is definitely a need. I do believe that it's a human need to be intimate with someone that way.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, and I can definitely relate. Like I have felt this at times. Sometimes I don't want to have sex because I'm afraid of like that, of connecting with you on that level, right? Like maybe we're going through some kind of argument and I'm just like trying to force distance, right? Sex is a way to, it's not a way to like just sweep something under the rug, but it's a way to connect with someone on a physical level that allows whatever argument or disagreement or obstacle that you're hitting to, it allows you to work through that more effortlessly.
Yeah, it smooths the edges. It makes it like a little, there's like it takes away some of the tension. It makes people a little bit like less judgmental, and you reconnect with that person, and you remember like just all the hormones going through your body and that feeling of bliss afterwards. It's really hard to hate someone up close or be angry at someone up close, and that's like really close, right? So you just got really close with that person. Like it's a really great reminder of like that you love this person, and this is someone that you share these types of experiences with. So it's easier. It like kind of, I feel like it smooths out the edges of any argument that you're having. Like it's still there, but it can help you remind you that this person is your person.
Right. Also, what you already touched on is the personal benefit of it, right? Like how it affects your individuality, not just bringing the relationship closer together, but how it affects each individual.
For sure.
That is assuming you're having great sex. I think if you have like fast food sex, this is part of the problem. People discount sex because most people are having fast food sex, right? They're meeting in the bedroom. They're just taking their clothes off and immediately just like P in the V. They're just going like straight. They're going straight to town, and that's what I'm calling fast food sex. It can be physically stimulating and exciting, but it doesn't allow you to reach those higher levels of connection or release, right? It doesn't allow you to release emotionally, spiritually, anything like that. So kind
of what I hear you saying, it's kind of like the whole uncertainty thing. Like people just like know what works, they do what works, they get straight to it, and they don't do as much of the like, what do you call it? Like
Seducing,
right. Or seduction, foreplay, courting, or like, trying something new, or, exploring different boundaries, which can keep things exciting. Where fast food sex, like, I know this works. I know I'm gonna enjoy it this way, but it's like not, it's the beginning of your relationship is super novel. Like everything's really new and exciting and you're really unsure about it, where sex can be the same way. Sex is also really new and exciting, and it's different every single time, and you're just figuring each other out. But then once you figured each other out, if you're doing it the same way every single time, that's going to become less novel.
Right.
So therefore, it's going to become less exciting automatically. Even just like not just the parts of your relationship, connection, desire, but also, or uncertainty, also the sex that you're having. If it's exactly the same every single time, you know how it's going to go, there's no uncertainty there. This is how it's going to go. There's nothing erotic about it.
Right. So yeah, what you're talking about is the fourth and biggest myth of them all, and that's sex is just about sex, right? So in early on in a relationship, there are hours and sometimes days of buildup of tension that lead to sex, right? It's the texting, it's the like making the plans for the perfect evening.
It's like going on a date and being so careful about what you wear and how you do your makeup and do your hair, and like just the nowadays it's like what you post on social media, and that they're gonna see, and you're like, those are things that you think about, and then that stuff you start caring a little bit less about those types of things, for sure. But could be days of courting and seduction and doing little things like
So if you think about it like a rubber band, most people when they enter a relationship, they just start pulling the rubber band back slowly over the course of time. Maybe it's a couple hours, maybe it's a couple days. They pull it back further, pull it back further, pull it back further, pull it back further, just creating all of this tension between them and the other person. And so when they release it, it is just so, I don't want to get like too gross here, but it's explosive, right? It is such a release on so many levels that that is great sex. That is what makes great sex. What happens over time is people, like, we get used to this person, we get used to the same positions and way of going about it, that it loses all of that pulling back of the rubber band, right?
For
that
sure.
creating of tension.
Yeah. And I can definitely, I don't think that, even you and I, like, we think about this a lot. We put a lot of effort towards this. We're not like courting each other for days, this is, we've been almost married for 2 years. We are not courting each other for days, but we have like a couple little hacks that we use and are continuing to develop a repertoire of tools in our toolbox of things that we can use to create more tension, to make things more exciting, for sure. I mean, I don't know if we're going to talk about this later in the podcast, but can I give a couple examples?
You talking about dildos?
No, I'm not talking about that. I mean, we can if you want to.
Just kidding.
I don't know how far we're going.
Go. Say it.
Like one example would be just you plan, we have our like, this is kind of lame, but we have our Google calendars linked, and I'll go to my computer and I'll have an email notification of Michael says date night, and it says the date and the time that it's going to be. And I had no idea he was even going to do that. And just that like uncertainty of, oh my gosh, he like has this date that's coming up and I don't know what it's going to be. And then you can text me and you can tell me what kind of outfit I need to wear for that night. There's like, then when I know that this is an important evening, or like an evening that's going to be exciting, it's special. Like, we make things a little bit more special so that I'm going to be more careful about what I choose to wear. I'm not going to just go in my usual like baggy jean shorts and white t-shirt. I'm going to put on some makeup, or I'm going to do my hair special. And I think that all adds to the whole tension that we were just talking about. And we're not doing this for days like we did at the beginning of our relationship, but we have a couple things like that.
Yeah, that brings up a couple things. First, and we should have, if this isn't already clear, we should have made it clear. We're not talking about this just for the culmination of like having sex. We're talking about it from the standpoint of creating more eroticism in your relationship. Some nights we might go on a date and like flirt with each other and be super attracted to one another and have this like spontaneous fun evening, and not even have sex at all. And it's still an amazing night,
it's like cultivating that desire at the beginning. Like, I want to desire you for the rest of my life. Like, I want to look at you and desire you just as much as feeling connected to you. I don't want to lose that desire that I have for you. And nights like that, even if they don't end up in the bedroom, I mean, sometimes they definitely do not. So like, it still is kind of like a little memory I can put back in my little box in my head. And
that's the female version of the spank bank that she's referring to. The little box.
I can keep that as a memory of like, I desire my husband. Like, that's an amazing evening.
Right. We all long to be adventurous with our significant others, right? To enjoy excitement with them, and that's always present in the beginning of relationships. And it just if we're not conscious about it and intentional about it, then we can and will lose that aspect of our relationship over time.
Yeah. And I do know that at the end, when we talk about how to make sex better, we will talk about like some specific ways to create a container for that evening to make it even better. Exactly. So stay tuned, guys.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about what are we going to talk about? So other ways to create desire, right? Not just about sex. And the first one that I've got here is the importance of space in a relationship. So a really cool concept that our friend Annie taught us a while back is, in relationships in general, it's perfectly natural and healthy to oscillate between closeness and space, between times where you're spending 100% of the time together and times where you don't spend any time together at all. And we just had a recent breakthrough a couple days ago. I was gone in Ireland for 12 days. And some people look at that and think, oh, you must miss each other so much. That's so sad. How could you be away from each other so long? And my answer is that, sure, we miss each other, but we also both enjoyed the hell out of our time apart. And we got to do things that we wouldn't have gotten to do if the other were around, right? We got to hang out with more friends. We got to just like be an individual more than we usually are. And when we came back together, we were just so, and I'm speaking for myself, I think I speak for both of us, just so appreciative for the other. And again, like so attracted to one another.
And the last 7 days of that trip, we didn't speak, text, no communication whatsoever. So that was, I think, the longest time that we've ever gone without speaking at all, like any communication. It was a forced
disconnection. It wasn't like I was ignoring her.
I wasn't messaging you, so it's cool. But I knew he was going to be completely unplugged. And I just want to preface this by saying, if anyone's like, oh, I could never, like, I hate being away from my partner, I am that person. Like, I am that person who, before meeting Michael and really diving into what can make our relationship healthier and more successful, I never wanted to be away from each other. I would never. The first time Michael spent 2 weeks away from me, he went to Peru. I was so depressed. I don't think I've been that sad in a really, really long time. I was in Santa Cruz. I was alone. I missed you so much. And I just couldn't discover what to do with myself without you around. And in that moment, I would have been like, I never want you to be away from me. And now being like at least halfway on the other side of that, or like further to the other side, not talking to you for 7 days and being away from you. You were gone for 12 days, but I had been gone for a couple of days before that. So being away from each other for over 2 weeks, I am so grateful for being able to take that experience and thrive in that way that I never had imagined that I'd be able to. I've been able to do more of my own individual things and discover new people. I hung out with strangers I'd never hung out with before. I used the opportunity to focus on my extracurricular activities and my hobbies, and really just like being okay.
When you're an adult, what makes it an extracurricular? Something outside of your career?
I guess so.
Gotcha.
Oh yeah, and I'm in school, so it is an extracurricular.
Yeah, it is an extracurricular. Everything's an extracurricular.
My job is an extracurricular. But I guess my hobbies. And yeah, I really appreciated the space. And then when you came back, it was like, I mean, especially closer to the days that you were coming home, like 2 days before, 3 days before, I was so excited for you to come home. Like, definitely had butterflies in my stomach. I'm driving to the airport. And one thing that really helped, me, was I actually had a conversation with Annie while you were gone, and realizing that we've had a lot of people living in our house for a while. So we've had a lot of like time with other people. And I thought that the antidote to like feeling connected to you would be like being together, like just you and I, but actually being apart from each other made me feel so connected to you. And that was such a huge breakthrough, so counterintuitive. And it gave me the opportunity to create a ritual around you coming home, which was so special for me. Like, I got to cook you your favorite meal. I got dressed up in a nice dress. Like, it was just such a special moment that wouldn't have been possible if we didn't have that space.
And so the lesson that we've learned is that not to wait until we're so sick of just being around each other, but to insert times where we're apart, and to really give each other permission for two things. One, give each other permission when the other asks for space, and to actually encourage it. And then also having the courage to ask for it and stand up for ourselves when we need space.
Yeah.
And it's not, that does not mean that we are tired of the other. It doesn't mean that something is going wrong. It just means in this moment, I need some space, and I'm doing it in part for myself and in part because it's going to be better for our relationship.
Yeah, it is for the relationship too. It is for the other person too, because ultimately you being irritable and resentful towards me that you didn't get the space is bad for me. So it's definitely for me just as much as it is for you to get that space. And I think for people like you and I who spend a lot of time together, we work together, we do a lot of things together. We have a lot in common too. We don't have a lot of separate hobbies and interests.
You don't even know me.
So I think we are very intentional about it. So we might actually put it on the calendar that like you're going to be somewhere different than me, or I'm going to take space separate from you, and we will be that intentional about taking space.
Let's talk about better dates. So you already started to talk about it a little bit. I don't know. I guess as I've become an adult, the idea of date night it has become more prevalent. I've started hearing it more, as opposed to when I was younger. But I think it's people's hearts are in the right place. Their intentions are correct, but I honestly don't think they're doing it right. I don't think people are having date nights in a way that is truly rejuvenating and fulfilling to their relationships. Mm-hmm. How can people have better dates? And again, guys, like this is something that we are just right smack dab in the middle of working on ourselves. We're just as messy as anyone, so I don't want anyone to think we think we're better than anyone else. It's just we are always talking about how we can improve, and so we're just sharing our experience. Yeah.
So I love date night. I think that the whole idea of being intentional about spending time, like that's completely sacred. So that is my first point of the way to make date night epic and amazing and erotic and exciting and uncertain is one suggestion would be to keep anything secular completely outside of date night. And that might mean like you and I work together, so it's super easy for one of us to just bring work into the equation. We also own a house together, so like talk about the air conditioning is broken, or talk about the dog, or talk about like things that are not sacred, like not about intimacy and connection. If that starts leaking into the conversation, it immediately makes date night not as exciting and not as intimate. So it's okay if it does leak into the conversation, but you can have an agreement with one another that, if the other person starts talking about things that are secular, like bills and work and that kind of thing, just to like, either have a safe word or give permission to the other person to call you out and be like, hey, that's secular. Can we just talk about that tomorrow?
Mm-hmm. And one thing that we've learned is try not to make that person wrong for doing it, because they probably didn't do it intentionally. Right? They probably didn't start talking about work to ruin the moment. They just weren't aware of it. So Adee and I basically just say, hey, can we just talk about that? Do you mind if we talk about that later? And it's a much more soft approach, and just works a lot better.
Yeah. Another thing is, I think this is probably the biggest thing on how to make date night really exciting. And of course, not every date night has to be this way, but a really exciting date night would be to set a container for that evening for it to have very few responsibilities. So that could be like taking an Uber to your restaurant. So you don't even have to think about parking. You don't have to think about whether you're going to have a couple drinks or not, how you're going to get home. Like you don't have to think about really have as few responsibilities as possible. So don't put date night the night before you have like something. I mean, don't put this kind of date night the night before you have something really early in the morning that you're going to have to get up for. Like you're preparing for a big live event the next day, or like a big competition the next day. That's not the optimal container to create. You want to have as few responsibilities as possible so that you can be as stress-free and open to experiencing anything the night has to offer. I
love it. Yeah. So another thing that we do is sometimes, like when one person plans the evening, then they'll keep everything a secret from the other person, right? So it's exciting for the person preparing the evening, and it's also exciting for the person that doesn't know what's going to happen. And so that's kind of that is of the same essence of what happens in the beginning of a relationship, where we put all of this effort and intention into creating a really awesome evening, and it just kind of adds to the excitement a little bit.
Right.
Another one that, I mean, I'm just so obsessed with this topic because I think it's so important. Put the technology away. Right?
Oh, totally.
Leave your phone in the car. When you're in a brand new relationship, you would not be looking at your phone, checking your text messages or your emails while this sexy piece is across the table from you.
I would give the advice. I'm definitely more apt to check my phone than Michael is. So if you're in a relationship where one of you is just better self-control around the cell phone, I don't bring my phone into because sometimes you need your phone. So let's say we were going to go on a date night, we were going to call an Uber. Someone would have to have their phone to call the Uber. Michael's generally the one responsible. So I'll leave my phone completely at home. He has credit cards, money, whatever we need. I bring my ID and nothing else. So I don't even have the temptation there.
Boom. Another one to create more desire is, we've kind of been dancing all around this topic already, but it's just putting more effort into individuality. There's, on our last show, we talked about in a relationship, there's usually one person that's more I-centered and one person that's more we-centered or more us-centered. Both are of equal importance, and that's that. Desire is usually related more to the individuality aspect and the I-centered part of it, because when you're focused on yourself, then you create a little bit of distance between those around you, which again creates some of that polarity, creates some of that distance that you want in eroticism. Do you want to talk a little bit about your evolution and seeing the benefits for you in focusing on individuality?
I think that for me, I'm the we-centered person. Everybody probably knows this already that's ever listened to any relationship podcast before. But I would get so wrapped up in, is this what you want? And I would change my own behaviors to try and do what you want or try and plan what you want. And sometimes I would miss the mark. So neither of us were happy because I wasn't doing what I wanted. And it didn't land for you. So that me flipping the switch of being like, okay, what do I actually want? And taking the time to discover whether it's in dates or whether it's actually in the bedroom and having sex, figuring out what I need and what I want has improved my quality of those experiences without a doubt. Because now I know that you're going to be happy if I'm excited and you want me to have a good experience. I want you to have a good experience. So first and foremost, we had to figure out what we need as individuals, and then we could communicate that together and find the we part, the compromise part. But I would have definitely been super quick to be like, oh, what I need is what you need.
Right.
And just adopt your needs as my own. And having the experience of being able to figure out my own needs has completely changed my life for sure.
Right. Yeah. For me, individuality is all I ever knew before you. So that part comes super easy to me. A couple things that I've learned is not to, at first I felt, I felt like I was being pushy, right? Pushing you to go and to focus more on your individuality rather than let you kind of find it on your own. And I don't think that was very helpful. I think encouraging you in a more in a softer way would have been better in the beginning.
Maybe. I think you did a really good job of being really excited when I did do things. I thrive on you praising me, so you would praise me for those things. And I want more praise, so I would do the things that would get me more praise. So if you praise me, I'm so proud of you for working on your art, or I'm so proud of you for asking for what you wanted, or it's so exciting that you discovered this need of yours. That
for going and hanging out with friends.
Yeah, whatever it was that really helped me being oh, I'm doing good.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. Fuck yeah. Okay. Let's talk about how to have better sex.
Okay. So, I just thought of this as we were talking, but it's not on that list, I don't think. But I think something that so many people, including me, are terrified of is having conversations about how the sex actually is with that person. Me talking to you about was that good for you? We've had a couple conversations where afterwards I'm hey, I have a question for you, where I'm just like a child, like a little girl, just so nervous to ask this question. And I'm like, hey, this happened or that happened. Did you like that? Or if something felt uncomfortable for me, I'll specifically ask if you liked that, because if you liked it, I would understand. But if you didn't, I'd be like, can we just not do that again?
Mm-hmm.
And I think people really get afraid of having those conversations. I would encourage people to definitely ask those kinds of questions like, hey, what was your favorite part? Did you like this? Did you like that? Like, or I noticed that you do this consistently. Is that something that you really like? Or is there something that I'm not doing that you would prefer?
Mm-hmm.
I think those conversations are really important.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think the easiest time to have it is right after sex. And it even more, I don't know about more powerful, but can definitely have better sex in the short run is like have a conversation or make a comment right before or during, right?
Yeah.
Which is just harder to do.
Right, for sure. Right after, I think, is definitely easier. Like, you're in like this blissful state. You're like loving on each other. It's just a lot easier.
Another one is something that we just learned at I guess it was like a sensuality workshop. And it was the power of using your hands more. So most of us use our hands
as a tool,
right? To grab and to put the other in a certain position, or to put ourselves in a certain position.
Or even in life, to like pick things up, to work things, to write, to type on the computer.
Exactly. Yeah. Rather than treating it as a sensory input, right? I think
it has
hands,
the third most senses, as
right.
opposed from your like actual genitals and your mouth. I think your hands have the third most, I don't know what the word was. Nerve receptors,
whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know what that's a technical term, but basically.
Yeah. And it's like we went to this class and we spent, I think it was like 45 minutes basically feeling our hands in different ways, like being sensual.
Touching different like everyday common objects with our hands in different ways, basically.
Yeah, like doing it softly, doing it on the back of our hands. And if you actually do that with your own hands, like even as you're listening to this right now, like softly touch your hands, like the insides, feel which sides are more sensitive than others. You'll feel all of those nerve receptors.
And I had a couple big takeaways from that. And the first was like really, I don't know, surface level, which was I noticed if I go slower, a lot of times it was like so much more, what's the word? Sensitive and like sensual, right? It felt so fucking good to like really, really slow it down.
And we're talking about hands.
We're talking about hands. We're talking about hands. Yes. And so obviously like my mind goes to, in foreplay, just to slow things down, or even in sex in general, just to really, really slow things down sometimes can be just something different and incredible.
Yeah.
The other thing was like every part of our body is kind of the same way in that we receive a ton of different sensory input in every part of our body. And it taught me like stop, like kind of break out, like get out of the box a little bit, break out of the mold of just having sex in certain ways that I've had before, and start like exploring with my body and with your body again. Right.
Right. I think the exploration thing was a really big thing. Like, don't neglect my back, like what if you gave me a massage, or what if like you spent some time focusing on my quad? Like, who knows? We focus on certain pieces of the body that are just like most relevant to actually completing the action of having sex. But it made me realize like every single piece of your body could be sexual or sensual. We just don't take the time to investigate. So I think that could be like a great way to have better sex, is to just explore each other.
And the last one that I have down here is focusing on your breath a little bit.
Anyway, I think I have one more after this.
Perfect. So this is something that I never even considered before reading The Way of the Superior Man. But if you think about think about a time when you've been in meditation and you've just like really tapped into the present moment, everything kind of slows down. You probably have zero stress in your body or in your mind. Everything becomes effortless. and you're just more grounded, right? The same thing. And then when, like in life, in activities, when you start to get stressed, when you start to become, have self-doubt or fear, your breath tends to kind of constrict and shorten.
Tense.
Right? And so a strategy in life is when you feel those kinds of sensations to take bigger, deeper breaths, and that taps you into the present moment, gets you out of your head, and so that you're embodying whatever it is you're doing. Same thing with sex. We have a tendency to get up in our head, like, is she liking it? Am I liking it? Does that feel good?
What do I look like?
Exactly. What do I look like? What should I do next? Is this boring? Like all of those different things. It's totally natural to have those thoughts. Taking some big, deep breaths, and it can be, you can just do it like a few, or you can just literally breathe through the entire experience, can get you completely out of your head and into your body, which is what what the experience is.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I think it can also help you be like more in control of your body while like, cause you're more focused, you're in your body. So, I mean, it can help sex last longer. It can help it feel better for you. You can be more in touch with like how the physical sensations actually feel instead of being distracted. So I love that. It's a great suggestion. I have one more. I think I have one more. So I guess this would have been earlier on, but one thing that I think has been a special little hack that we've like tried to implement. I don't think we're perfect at implementing it just because we had some like technology issues, but having a space somewhere, it doesn't have to be involved in technology at all, but having like one method of communication that is just for
space,
like we call it an erotic space. This is another suggestion that was taught to us from one of our mentors, Annie, and
I think Esther Perel talks about it as well.
Oh, does she? Or maybe it was Esther Perel that taught it to us instead of Annie. Who knows? Either Esther or Annie, we love them both. But having an erotic space. So this method of communication, and it has to be different than other ways that you communicate. So often Michael and I will text message about things that we need the other to do. Can you go get milk? Can you do this? Like, will you do Instacart today? Like,
will you go get milk? Yeah. That has literally never happened.
I'm just using a cliche. That's the cliche is like, can you pick up milk on your way home?
Right.
But secular things will happen in text messages, or even phone calls. Like secular things will happen on phone calls. Slack, that's where we use like business communications. Email, most of our business communications happen there. So having one method of communication, whether maybe it's handwritten notes or a certain app or something, to only talk about erotic conversations. So in that space, there's nothing else other than talking about like intimacy. And I think not only is this exciting, like you get to like explore things you want to say about the other. You might say things that you might not otherwise have said because now you have this area to say those kinds of things. And it's only for those kinds of things. It's also exciting when like you get a message in that area and you're like, ooh, what did they say? And like you get to go and look. I think that within itself is exciting, but I think it creates like a safe space to have conversations you might not have had before. Like it kind of makes me feel like almost like I have like an alternate ego, like an alternate, is that what it is? An alternate
alter ego?
An alter ego. Like I have an alter ego and I'm a different person in there. So I could ask things I would have never asked, or I could say things I would have never said. And it's like a little bit a different piece of me, like a piece of me that exists, and that's my sexual identity and my sexuality, and I can explore and like see how far I want to take it and what feels right to me. And it's the safe place that I know that like nothing else is going to be talked about there other than this. Right. So
what is your porn star name? What is that alter ego?
Oh, isn't your porn star name your first street name and your first dog? Oh, it's your first dog is your first name and your first street name is this is your porn star name. Mine is terrible. You have to say yours after.
Wait, so
it's your first pet's name, your first pet. I know, yours is gonna be the worst. So it's your first pet name and then your first street name. So
I don't know my first street name.
The
first one I remember.
Yeah, the first one you remember. So mine is Num Num Nathan. That's my porn star name.
Mine is Curly Curly Q East Maine.
Curly Q East Maine.
God damn, that is sexy. Num Num Nathan. That's actually pretty good.
I've heard some good ones before, but I can't think of them right now.
Where were we? We
were talking about the erotic space. What is the erotic space like for you? Just like having that space.
I don't know if I have anything to add. I think, yeah, no? It's just like having a space that is just for that part of your relationship, right? And it's really like what we want to focus on here, and really what we're talking about in this whole conversation is separating connection and desire, because they are totally opposite things. And the temptation is to just have everything, like mix everything. Like a lot of people mix work and their relationships and blah, 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 and they don't have good boundaries around it. And so none of those areas of their life get their full attention. By creating boundaries and keeping a separate erotic space, we're protecting that part of our relationship, so that when we go there, it like all of our attention gets to go there. And
it's essentially like creating a company. Like you have a company and you have different functions within your company. You have like the marketing, the financial, the legal, the customer service. Like you have all these different sections. Your relationship also has that, and you as a person also have different sections of you. And what we try to do is have systems in place, like a business would, that allows us to cultivate all pieces of ourselves. And that's for the way that it works for us is we're very intentional about it. Like we put intention around creating these containers and having enough discipline to create freedom. So we put discipline around certain areas so that it's not all mixed, like you were talking about. It's not just like we don't just like assume that we're going to have the discipline to spontaneously want to have sex with each other. Like we create systems to cultivate that piece of our relationship so that it makes it more likely to actually occur. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really helped us for sure. And yeah,
guys, we want to leave on a really important note, or several notes. One, have more sex.
Yeah.
It's better for your relationship. It's better for your life.
I'm pretty sure it's one of the top stress relievers. If you're stressed out in any way, which almost everybody is, having sex is a great way to relieve some of that stress.
Second, don't have fast food sex.
Yeah.
Create some tension. Create an erotic space in your relationship, using some of the ways that we have, or anything that works for you. But court your person, your partner. Like, put in some work to create some excitement in your relationship. And you might have to get creative, and you probably won't get it right the first time. You might make some mistakes. Y'all might get uncomfortable with each other, and that's okay. That's all part of the fun.
Yeah. And how much more do you love somebody after they've like kind of been vulnerable and did something silly and they feel kind of embarrassed? Like, you look at them and you're like, I still love you. And that is just such a great way to build connection between each other. Another note, if you guys are looking for some structure, for some questions to ask each other and how to explore these types of conversations to make it a little less uncomfortable, I know that Esther Perel just released an intimacy inventory, another way to explore your sexuality. It's 10 questions. She suggests looking at 1 or 2 each day and journaling about it. I know that Michael and I are going to do that, and we're going to discuss our responses with each other, but it gives you 10 questions about your sexuality. Goes back to how you manage relationships and feel about relationships in regular life. I think you can just search Esther Perel Intimacy Inventory. Give her your email. She's awesome, and you'll get it in your inbox.
Boom. Do we have anything else? I don't think so. You know, it helps. It helps our relationship that you're incredibly attractive. So if I could
in response, I didn't mean agreed. Like, yes, it helps that I'm attractive. It helps that you're attractive too.
Guys, we just want to let y'all know it is possible to have a super close relationship and have great sex for a long period of time. So don't give up. Try new things. Love each other. Play with each other. Have a ton of fun. We love you guys.
We love you guys.
Bye.
This episode is finished, but your training journey continues. Head over to brutestrengthtraining.com/SSW and grab your free pack of 32 accessory workouts that you can incorporate into your training and start improving your strength immediately. That's brutestrengthtraining.com/SSW.